The moment I saw the email, my heart sank. It was from my boss, John, the one person I trusted in this place. But trust had been a fool's game, hadn't it? I hadn't expected betrayal from him, not like this. The subject line read, "Urgent update, your position and next steps." The tension in my chest tightened like the walls of a room closing in on me. I clicked it open, though I already knew what I'd find. This story will leave you on the edge of your seat. A simple accident escalates into a web of betrayal and revenge, where every twist brings a new revelation. Don't blink. Watch how far one woman will go to reclaim what's been taken from her. Effective immediately, we're reassigning your responsibilities to Megan. She's demonstrated leadership in recent weeks, and we believe she's the right fit for the direction we're heading. I stared at those words as if they were mocking me. They felt like a slap across my face. I had worked years for this, put in countless late nights, helped the team grow, took on every challenge without hesitation. Yet all it took was one person to turn the tides, one smiling face to stab me in the back. Megan. My own sister. I hadn't expected it from her. Not after all the years of pretending to be a supportive teammate, but there it was. Her name in bold, as if it had always been meant to be there. I sat at my desk, the screen flickering in front of me. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to breathe deeply. The office was quieter than usual, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the soft tapping of keyboards in the background. Everything seemed normal, too normal considering the storm brewing in my chest. I had to act fast. I knew it. I knew Megan was a sly one, but this was too much. How long had she been planning this? The thought of her watching me, pretending to be my friend, knowing what was coming, it made my skin crawl. The email was a public declaration of war. But I wasn't going to sit back and let her win. Not without a fight. A surge of cold resolve washed over me, and I found myself rising from my chair, walking toward the window. Outside, the rain was beginning to fall, a steady rhythm against the glass, like nature's way of mimicking the way I felt inside. The world outside was changing, and I had no intention of letting it leave me behind. I closed my eyes, letting the cool air from the vent hit my face. I thought of how Megan had always been the golden child. From the moment we were little, she had always been the one who got the attention, the praise, the promotion, while I worked quietly in the background. I'd accepted it over the years, convinced that my worth wasn't tied to her theatrics. But this was different. I should have seen it coming. She'd been acting distant lately, too distant. I thought it was just work stress, but now I realized it had all been part of her plan. The quiet snickers behind my back, the subtle manipulation of others to get in good with the boss, and the late-night team meetings, where she just happened to be the one left in charge. Everything made sense now. But it wasn't too late. I wasn't about to let her run me out of the place I'd worked so hard for. I clicked the mouse, shutting the email with a finality that felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. But deep inside, a rage simmered, the kind I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't going to let this slide. Megan had made a grave mistake, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. It was time to make a move. I needed a plan, something slow, something methodical. Megan had a way of charming everyone into believing she was the victim, the one who needed the most support. But it was all a facade. People could only be fooled for so long. The office had grown quieter still. I could feel the eyes of my coworkers as they passed by my desk, their glances flicking toward me before quickly looking away. I could sense it, they knew. They could feel the tension in the air, the invisible shift that no one dared to address. I needed to act, and I needed to act quickly. If I gave Megan the upper hand now, she would run with it. No, I wouldn't let that happen. I had something she didn't: patience. I had years of watching, years of seeing through the lies. Megan had made her move too early, thinking she could sneak past me, that no one would notice her little games. But I noticed. And now I had to make my own move. I took a deep breath, standing there at the window. The rain was coming down harder now, its steady beat almost comforting, as if it understood what I was about to do. Megan thought she had won, but she was wrong. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. I pulled my phone from my bag, scrolling through the contacts, my thumb hovering over John's number. I hesitated. Should I call him now? Tell him exactly what I thought of his little email? No, that wasn't the way to do it. John wasn't the problem. Megan was. And I was going to make sure she understood just how deeply she had underestimated me. I sent John a quick message instead. Simple. Direct. We need to talk. I hit send and let the words sit there like a stone in my gut. I wasn't sure how he would respond, but I didn't care. I knew that whatever happened next, it was going to be the beginning of something much bigger. I turned away from the window, my mind already racing ahead. There was more to this than just losing my job. Megan had gone too far this time. It wasn't just a promotion she'd stolen from me. It was my dignity, my hard work, my trust. And that would not go unpunished. I walked back to my desk and pulled up my calendar. I needed to gather information, evidence. The office was full of secrets, full of things that no one had dared to mention. But I knew exactly where to look, exactly who to talk to. Megan might have thought she was untouchable, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. She was just one misstep away from losing everything. And I would be there to push her over the edge. The clock on the wall ticked steadily as if mocking me. How long would I have to wait before everything unraveled? I sat down and began typing, pulling up the files I knew I'd need. My hands moved quickly, but I made sure to keep my movements controlled. Every click of the keyboard was deliberate. Every word written was part of a plan that would slowly, carefully destroy everything Megan had worked for. She thought she had won the battle. But I knew this war wasn't over. The minutes stretched on, but they didn't matter. I wasn't waiting for her to come to me. I was waiting for her to slip. I was waiting for her to make a mistake. And when she did, I'd be ready. I wasn't going down without a fight. This section sets up the emotional tension and establishes the narrator's calm, methodical plan for revenge. The betrayal is clear, but the full extent of the twist is still hidden, leaving the audience on edge and wanting more. I couldn't stop staring at the message on my phone, the one from John, the one I'd sent, the one that said, "We need to talk." It had been 2 days since I'd sent it, and the silence that followed was deafening. He'd read it. I knew he had. I could see it in the little gray checkmark under the message. But still nothing. No reply. I tried not to let it bother me, but I could feel the unease growing, like a knot tightening in my stomach. He knows something's wrong, I told myself. But he doesn't know the whole story yet. I glanced around my small office space, the cubicle walls feeling more suffocating by the minute. I hadn't heard from Megan either. Not that I expected her to reach out, not after what happened. She had her promotion, and I had been quietly moved aside like a piece of furniture that no longer had any use. The air felt heavy, and every time I walked down the halls, the hushed whispers seemed to follow me. People weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They were all waiting for me to crack. Waiting for me to make my move. But they didn't know that I wasn't just going to react. I had spent too many years being patient. Watching, listening, and learning. I was done being the one who only fixed things and picked up the pieces. Now I was going to make sure the ones who had played me would be the ones who had to clean up the mess. I pulled my chair closer to the desk, resting my elbows on the wood. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, but I didn't type anything. I just let the minutes tick by. The world around me moved like clockwork, everyone on their little routines. They had no idea what was about to hit them. It wasn't about making a scene. Megan would have loved that, to have me make a public spectacle of her betrayal. No, I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. My revenge would be quiet. It would be subtle. One thread at a time, I would weave a tapestry of deceit that would bring her down, slowly and quietly, without her even realizing what was happening until it was too late. I needed to start somewhere. Where did it all begin? I took a slow breath, letting my mind wander back to the moments that didn't seem like much at the time, but now, in hindsight, looked like the first signs of her manipulation. The little things she'd said, the way she'd laughed when I was excluded from meetings I used to attend, the way her smile seemed to be growing just a little too wide every time she made a suggestion that somehow always ended with her in charge. The first move would be to isolate her. She wasn't as untouchable as she thought. She'd been playing the long game, but now it was time for me to do the same. I pulled up my calendar on the screen and began looking for patterns. Team meetings, deadlines, client calls, any time I could get close enough to influence what people were thinking. Megan had been the one everyone trusted, the one they looked to for advice. But what if I could shift that trust just a little? What if I could plant the seeds of doubt in a way that made her actions look questionable? My eyes scanned the calendar. There it was, a meeting scheduled for the following week. Megan would be there, and so would the rest of the leadership team. A perfect opportunity. My fingers moved faster now, setting my plan into motion. It wasn't about just being there. It was about what I could find out. Megan was too confident in her place, too sure that no one would question her. But I had years of experience on my side. I knew how to look beyond the surface, how to read between the lines and understand what people were really saying. Megan had no idea I was watching, no idea that I knew exactly how to gather the information I needed to slowly unravel her. I sat back in my chair and let out a long sigh. The plan was starting to take shape. I didn't need to act right now. I needed to gather intel. I had to find out where she was vulnerable. People had secrets. Everyone had secrets. All I needed was to find the right one. As the day went on, I kept my head low, taking note of every small interaction between Megan and the others. I watched how she spoke to John, how she never made eye contact with certain people, how she looked over her shoulder when she thought no one was paying attention. Little signs, little pieces that told me more than her polished, perfect performance ever could. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I stayed behind. The office was silent, the hum of the overhead lights now the only sound filling the space. I went into the break room, opened the fridge and grabbed a cup of tea. The warmth from the mug seeped through my fingers, and I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the calmness of the moment settle over me. Then I heard it, footsteps. Soft, careful steps approaching the break room. I turned, my hand instinctively reaching for my phone. It was Megan. She was supposed to be long gone, but there she was, standing in the doorway, her face tight with concern. She didn't look at me immediately. No, she was too busy trying to keep the mask of confidence on her face. But I saw through it. I saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes, the subtle shift in her posture as if she were trying to make herself smaller. "You're still here?" she asked, her voice too casual, too forced. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied coolly, taking a sip of my tea. It was warm and bitter, like the taste of the revenge I was about to serve. She stepped into the room, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Just finishing up a few things." "Right." I nodded slowly, carefully. I didn't need to say much. I didn't need to let her know I knew what she was up to. All I needed to do was let her talk. And talk she did, rambling about the day's tasks, about meetings I wasn't invited to, about the promotions she'd secured. It was all coming together. Every word out of her mouth was another thread in the web I was building. It wasn't fast and it wasn't loud, but it was there. I could feel it. The foundations of her downfall were already in place. I smiled softly to myself as she finally left the room, too wrapped up in her own lies to notice the trap I was setting. She thought she was in control. But she was wrong. She'd made the mistake of thinking I was weak, of thinking that my silence meant I was defeated. She had no idea what was coming. The days blurred together, each one slipping by faster than the last. I watched as Megan's confidence seemed to grow, her hold over the office tightening with each passing hour. But she didn't know what I knew. And that was her mistake. It had been 2 weeks since I'd begun to quietly lay the groundwork, watching her every move, noticing the cracks she thought she could hide. The more I watched, the more I saw how fragile her carefully constructed facade really was. She wasn't invincible. No, she was only human. And like all humans, she made mistakes. She just didn't realize yet that I was patiently waiting for her to make the biggest one of all. Every time I entered the office, the buzz of whispered conversations followed me. They didn't dare say anything to my face, but I could feel the tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. People knew something was off. But no one had the courage to ask, and no one was brave enough to confront Megan. It seemed like they were all just waiting for someone to make the first move, to be the one to expose the truth. And that's when it hit me, I was going to be the one to make the move. Not with grand gestures, not with accusations shouted from the rooftops. No, I would do it my way, quietly, precisely, one small thread at a time, until she had no choice but to face the consequences. The first real crack appeared when I stumbled upon something unexpected while reviewing the files. It was a small detail, seemingly insignificant, but I knew it was important. Megan had missed a deadline on an internal report that, according to company policy, was supposed to be submitted to the board. A simple thing, but it was clear that she had covered it up. She had altered the document's timestamp to make it look like it had been submitted on time. That was a mistake. One that was easy enough to catch if you were paying attention, which of course I was. I held the printout of the altered document in my hand, feeling a sense of cold satisfaction. Megan had been sloppy. She thought she was untouchable, but I knew how to make her feel the walls closing in. Fully. Deliberately. I needed proof though. Just one more piece to cement my case, to ensure that when the time came she wouldn't be able to wriggle out of it. I knew I couldn't just drop this little tidbit on anyone yet. It had to be timed perfectly, like a trap closing around her. The board had to see this, and when they did, they wouldn't be able to ignore it. For the next few days I kept quiet, letting the tension build, letting her believe she was still in control. I watched her as she paraded around the office, speaking with authority, tossing out orders like they were nothing. She was so used to people listening to her, so used to the power she'd accumulated. But I could see through it. She was fraying at the edges, and it wasn't long before those little cracks started to show more clearly. During one particularly tense meeting I saw it. The way Megan's hands trembled ever so slightly as she clicked through her presentation slides. The way her breath caught when someone asked a question she wasn't prepared for. She was nervous. The control she had over everyone was starting to slip, and it felt delicious to watch. She didn't even realize she was unraveling, and that was the best part. She thought she was still in charge. I kept my eyes trained on her, allowing my face to remain calm and neutral, but my mind was racing. This is it, I thought. The perfect time to plant the seed of doubt. The others were starting to see it too. They weren't saying anything yet, but I could tell by the way they glanced at one another when Megan spoke. They weren't buying her act anymore. They were waiting for the truth to come out, but they didn't know how, or who, would expose it. I needed to be subtle. I needed to make sure she wouldn't know what hit her. So I made my move quietly, sending an anonymous email to one of the board members, attaching the altered report and asking if they had noticed any discrepancies. I made sure the email was polished, professional, giving no hint of the personal vendetta behind it. The next morning I watched from my desk as the email made its rounds. I could almost feel the weight of it, the shift in the air as the board started to question Megan. She wasn't aware, of course. She was still in her bubble, acting as though everything was business as usual. But I could feel it, the walls were starting to close in. A few hours later I caught wind of something else. One of the senior managers had approached Megan about a project that hadn't been moving forward as quickly as it should have. I could see her jaw tighten when she spoke to him, her words becoming sharper, more defensive. He was cracking. It wasn't just the little mistakes anymore. It was the fear that was starting to seep through. She knew something was off, but she didn't know what. And she was starting to panic. I could almost hear her thoughts as I watched her from across the room. Did I cover all my tracks? Did I leave anything behind? Is someone on to me? The next morning Megan's worst fear seemed to come true. As the board meeting began, I watched her squirm as the chairperson brought up the discrepancy in the report. It was just a small mention, but it was enough. Megan's face went pale, and I could see her trying to play it off, trying to brush it aside with her usual charm. But it wasn't working anymore. The board members were no longer looking at her with admiration. They were looking at her with suspicion. She was losing her grip, and she didn't even realize it. Her answers were becoming more flustered, more defensive. The walls were closing in and she was trapped. I had planted the seed, and now it was starting to grow. Slowly the doubt was taking root. Megan had been so confident in her power, so sure that she was untouchable. But the truth was, everyone had weaknesses. And now her weaknesses were beginning to show. She had no idea that the net was tightening, but I could feel it. The trap was set, and it wouldn't be long before she walked right into it. As the meeting ended and everyone trickled out of the room, I stayed behind, allowing myself a moment to savor the tension in the air. I could hear Megan's frantic footsteps as she rushed down the hallway, no doubt headed straight to John's office to try and talk her way out of this. But it was too late. She couldn't talk her way out of this one. The pieces were falling into place, and I was the one holding all the cards now. The waiting game was almost over. The walls were closing in on Megan, and she didn't even know it yet. It was only a matter of time before she realized that no matter how fast she ran, there was nowhere left to hide. The moment Megan left the boardroom, I could feel the weight of the room shift. The whispers had started, the questions lingering in the air. I watched her walk down the hall, head held high, but I knew she knew. The confidence she had worn like armor for so long was cracking, and she didn't even realize how far gone it was. It had been building for weeks now, the cracks growing larger, the tension palpable. Megan was no longer the confident, untouchable woman who strutted through the office with a smug smile. The strain was visible now, the tightness in her shoulders, the quickened pace of her steps, the way she clutched her phone like a lifeline whenever she thought no one was watching. It was as if she could feel the noose tightening, even if she didn't know exactly who was pulling the strings. I hadn't let up, of course. I had learned long ago that a slow burn was often the most effective way to take someone down. Megan had tried to bury everything, but I had been picking at the edges, loosening the threads until everything started to unravel. And now I was watching her squirm. It wasn't that I took pleasure in seeing her fall apart. Or maybe it was. A part of me had waited so long for this moment, watching her walk all over people, pretending to be the good daughter, the perfect employee, the one everyone could count on. She had fooled so many. But not me. I had seen through the facade. And now it was time for her to face the consequences. I glanced over at her office, the door half open. She was inside, probably pacing, trying to figure out how to save herself. The thought made me smile bitterly. She thought she was in control, that her charm would get her out of this. But I had planted the seed, and the more she tried to act like nothing was wrong, the worse it was going to get for her. I'd been watching Megan all day, my eyes catching her subtle signs of distress. She'd been snapping at people in the office. Her usual friendly demeanor had turned brittle. She barely acknowledged anyone who walked by her desk. And when she did speak to someone, her words were short, clipped, as if she was trying to maintain some semblance of control over a situation she could feel slipping away from her. I knew exactly what was happening. Her calm exterior was nothing more than a mask now. She was terrified. Terrified that the truth was starting to leak out, that people were starting to see her for what she really was. She thought she could cover it all up, but the cracks were everywhere. And I was the one who had made sure of it. I leaned back in my chair, allowing myself a small moment of satisfaction. But there was no time to rest. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even the climax. It was just a step toward what was coming. I had to stay vigilant. Keep pushing. Megan had no idea what was waiting for her. The phone on my desk rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I picked it up, keeping my voice calm and steady. Hello. Miss Jenkins, it's John. Can we talk? I felt my stomach flip. John. He had been so quiet lately, but I knew he was paying attention now. I had made sure of it. Of course, John. What's on your mind? I kept my tone neutral, giving nothing away. I just wanted to check in, he said, his voice tight. We've had a few concerns raised regarding Megan's recent performance. I suppressed the urge to let out a breath of relief. This was it. The cracks were becoming undeniable. But I kept my voice steady. What concerns are you referring to? Her reports. Some discrepancies were pointed out to me. It's been mentioned that her performance has slipped recently. I couldn't stop the small, almost imperceptible smile from tugging at my lips. I've noticed that too. It's not surprising. Megan's always been a bit too quick to take shortcuts. John's silence on the other end made me uneasy. I knew I was treading a fine line. But I had to press forward. I'm sure it's nothing serious, but I think it's worth looking into further. I agree, John finally replied. Let's keep an eye on it. I'll talk to her, but there's something else I need to discuss with you. Can you come to my office after lunch? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Of course. I'll be there. The call ended and I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of the conversation settle in my chest. This was the turning point. The fact that John was finally acknowledging Megan's mistakes meant things were spiraling out of her control. And it was only going to get worse from here. Lunch came and went, but my thoughts were consumed by what had just happened. I was playing a dangerous game, but the stakes had never felt clearer. Megan's empire was crumbling. She didn't know it yet, but I could feel it. Her world was about to collapse and I was the one holding the hammer. As I walked to John's office, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I hadn't been in his office for a while. We used to talk all the time back when things were easier. But now, every interaction with him felt more like a chess move than a friendly conversation. John's office was on the other side of the floor, tucked away in a quiet corner. I knocked softly on the door before entering. He was sitting behind his desk, a pile of papers in front of him, his brows furrowed as he scanned through them. Come in, Miss Jenkins, he said, barely looking up. I stepped inside and took a seat across from him, my posture poised but my heart pounding. John, I said carefully, I know things have been difficult recently. But I want you to know I've always been dedicated to this company. Always given it my all. I know you have, he replied quietly, setting down his pen. Which is why I'm concerned about this situation with Megan. I raised an eyebrow. What exactly are you concerned about? Her temper, John said, his voice low. It's been getting worse. I've heard reports from several employees about her outbursts. It's not like her. She's usually calm, collected. I kept my face neutral. You don't think this is just stress from the pressure? I mean, she's been given a lot of responsibility lately. John shook his head. No. It's more than that. There's something else going on. Something that feels off. I'm not sure what it is, but I need to get to the bottom of it. I need you to keep an eye on her. I nodded slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I was already watching her, John. I've been watching her for weeks. I'll do that, I said quietly. I'll keep you updated. As I left John's office, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of triumph. Megan's outbursts, her increasingly erratic behavior. Everything was falling into place. She was losing her grip on her carefully crafted image, and I was standing there, waiting for her to make her next mistake. I didn't need to hurry. I didn't need to rush this. Megan was falling apart in front of everyone, and all I had to do was watch as she dug her own grave. The walls were closing in, and she didn't even know it yet. I left John's office, my mind a storm of thoughts, but one thing was clear. This was the moment. The final piece of the puzzle was slipping into place, and there was no going back. Megan was losing everything. Her calm, her control, her reputation, and she had no idea I was the one pulling the strings. I walked slowly down the hall, feeling the weight of the past weeks pressing against me. The subtle moves I'd made, the moments of quiet observation, all of it was about to pay off. It wasn't just about making her suffer. It was about justice. Megan had been playing the game for too long, pretending to be the good daughter, the competent employee, the trusted colleague. But she had manipulated everyone to get what she wanted, and it was time for that to end. The office buzzed with its usual rhythm, but today it felt different. There was an undercurrent of tension in the air, something thick and palpable that no one dared to speak about. People were starting to see Megan for what she really was. A fraud, a liar, and a manipulator. But they hadn't seen everything. They didn't know what I knew. And now it was time to make sure she paid for what she'd done. Not just to me, but to everyone she'd ever crossed. As I sat down at my desk, my hands moved instinctively. I pulled up the document I had been working on for the last few days. The email I had carefully crafted, the one that would be the final nail in her coffin. It was an anonymous tip to the board, outlining the full extent of Megan's deception. I had included everything. The falsified reports, the missed deadlines, the lies she had spun to cover her tracks. All of it would finally be laid bare. She wouldn't be able to spin her way out of this. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding as I clicked send. The weight of that one action settled over me, but it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like closure. Megan was no longer in control. I was. But the real satisfaction would come when she realized it. And I was ready to watch. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. I could hear Megan's voice through the walls, still trying to convince people that nothing was wrong, that everything was fine. But the walls had ears and people were starting to talk. He was too rattled to hide it anymore. He was slipping. She had already lost the respect of her colleagues, and once the board got the email, there would be nothing left for her. Around 4 o'clock I saw her walk into the break room, her face pale, her eyes wide. She was clutching her phone like it was a lifeline, but there was no denying the panic in her gaze. She was on the phone with someone, probably John, trying to figure out how to explain herself. She had no idea what was coming, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I watched her from the corner of the room, my hands folded in my lap. She didn't see me. She was too absorbed in her conversation. She wasn't even trying to pretend anymore. There were no more smiles, no more charm. She was frantic, and for the first time in years, I saw her for what she truly was. Desperate. The moment she hung up, she turned to leave, but then she saw me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment time seemed to stop. He knew. She didn't need to say a word. The panic in her eyes spoke volumes. She had no idea how much I knew or how deep I had gone, but she knew that the end was coming. The mask had finally slipped, and there was nothing left to hide behind. I stood up slowly, my heart steady as I walked toward her. "Megan," I said, my voice calm, but my words carrying the weight of everything I had been holding back. "We need to talk." Her face tightened. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you've made a huge mistake," she spat, trying to regain some semblance of control. I stepped closer, not backing down. "You think this is about me? About what you did to me? No, Megan. This is about you. About all the lies you've told, all the people you've stepped on to get ahead. This is about the truth finally coming out. She took a step back, her breath catching in her throat. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, I said softly. You're just not as clever as you think you are. You thought you could cover it all up. You thought you could manipulate everyone and walk away with a smile. But you've been slipping for weeks, Megan. And now it's all coming back to you. Her face flushed with anger, but I could see the fear creeping in behind her eyes. You have no proof. You can't do anything to me. I reached into my bag and pulled out a file, sliding it across the table toward her. She stared at it, her hands trembling as she slowly picked it up. You really think I'd let you walk away from this without paying the price? The board's already seen it, Megan. The lies. The reports. Everything. They're already looking into it. For a long moment she just stared at me, disbelief written all over her face. You sent that? Every word, I said, watching the realization hit her like a slap. She was sinking and she knew it. Her face crumpled. You'll regret this. You think you've won? This isn't over. But I didn't flinch. It is over. You're done. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Megan was gasping for breath, trying to find the words, but there was nothing left. She had nothing left. And she knew it. I'm sorry, Megan, I said, my voice soft but steady. I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner. But you're the one who made this personal. And now it's time for you to face the consequences. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. Instead, she turned and fled the room, her heels clicking frantically against the floor. I watched her go, feeling an odd sense of peace settle over me. She wasn't getting away with it. Not this time. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of everything sink in. The office, once a battleground of tension and silent games, now felt quiet, as if the storm had passed. I had fought my battle, not with anger, not with force, but with patience. With precision. And I had won. Megan had always been the one everyone admired. The one everyone trusted. But not anymore. The walls had closed in on her and she had nowhere left to run. I sat down at my desk and exhaled deeply, feeling the knot in my stomach finally loosen. It was over. She was finished. And I was free. For the first time in years I allowed myself to smile. Feeling the impact of betrayal? You're not alone. Subscribe for more heart-wrenching, emotional stories that dig deep into family secrets, revenge, and justice. Stay tuned for more twists, more tension, and more stories that speak to your heart.